Well, perfect, and welcome everyone. I know that we have others that will be joining us shortly, but welcome to our discussion today on the full tech stack for the modern law firm. Looking forward today to going through a few different topics with the panel, specifically talking about, the role of technology in daily operations for law firms, going through some practical applications as well as some strategies to help law firms in their operations. Today, excited to be joined by our panelists. We have Jay Barrett from Clio, Adam Dennis from Clio, and Mickey Wong, who's the founder of SimpleTrust Solutions. So Jay, Mickey, and Adam, thank you so much for joining. Maybe what we'll do is we'll kick off with just a quick introduction across the group, and then we'll jump into the discussion, into the meat of the discussion. So. By way of introduction, so my name is Djibrane Larrabure. I'm head of finance here at Kolleno. We are a global cloud-based B2B financial operations platform that works with a number of different law firms in North America and Europe to help them with their accounts receivables and financial operations processes. I'm also joined today by our panelist, Mickey Wong. Mickey, maybe I'll hand it over to you just for a quick introduction.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mickey Wong. I'm the founder of SimpleTrust Solutions. I started working at a law firm as just a receptionist, and I found all of these different ways that things could be faster, things could be easier. And then that kind of like snowballed into me running operations. And then I was like, oh, if I can help one law firm, I can help many law firms. So that's where SimpleTrust Solutions came about. I specialize in helping law firms with their trust accounting operations. So that's like my specialty, but I also do general operational consulting as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us as a panelist today, and also joined by Jay Barrett and Adam Dennis from Clio. Maybe Jay, I'll hand it over to you for a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me and Adam on this call. My name is Jay Barrett. I've been with Clio for almost 3 years now. So my role is partner marketing manager. So I really help partners like Kolleno develop educational sessions like the one we're doing today. And I'm super excited to be here. And Adam, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jay. And yeah, very excited to be here as well. My name's Adam Dennis, based out of Toronto. I am a partner account manager at Clio, been with Clio for just under 5 years. My main focus, similar to Jay, is serving as the liaison between all of our partners and our internal teams here at Clio. So I have the privilege of working very closely with the Kolleno team and work very closely with our sales team, marketing team, product. Quick overview on Clio might be helpful for everyone just to set the stage. For those who may not be aware, Clio is the leading cloud-based legal practice management software company in North America. We work with about 40,000 law firms across the globe that's spread across 100 different countries. We are a Canadian company founded out of Vancouver. Obviously, we have offices in Toronto, Calgary, Dublin, as well as Sydney. We represent about 40,000 law firms as our clients, and we have about 1,000 employees internally. We really do like to keep a lot of our development in-house, everything from product support, engineering, you name it. We have a very large sales team as well, about 150 reps, and we've been in business for about 15 years. As much as we're a practice management software company, we also do view ourselves as thought leaders within the space. We have an annual user conference, which is actually the image that you see on your screen right now. This past year, it was in Nashville. It's called the Clio Cloud Conference. We had about 3,000 in-person attendees and about 2,500 virtual. It's really an opportunity for our customers and prospects to come learn a little bit more about Clio, but more broadly about what's new within legal, learn about trends, key performance indicators, learn about emerging technologies. This upcoming year, it's actually be in Austin. So yeah, that's a little bit on Clio.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jay and Adam for joining us as well. To kick us off, Jay and Adam, I know, with Clio, you've worked with a number of different law firms and helping them to kind of optimize their own, tech stacks internally. But it would be helpful just to kick off to get an understanding of, what exactly is a legal tech stack? What are some of the key elements that really kind of feed into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we think about the legal tech stack, we really try and be mindful of the entire client journey, right? You can break it down to different chunks. So that's how we approach it here at Clio. Clio Grow would be like our intake and CRM module meant to streamline and automate a firm's intake process, right? So right when that lead comes in the door, what does that process look like? How are we going to make it as efficient as possible so that firms can retain leads more effectively, respond to them as quickly as possible, and then convert them into an ongoing matter. So Clio Grow would take care of all the lead conversion, have reports on marketing to understand where the leads are coming from. And then once that lead has actually been converted into a matter and that casework begins, that would be done within Clio Manage, which is sort of the meat and potatoes of the system. So almost everything from billing, documents, payments, communications. We have our own in-house payments module as well, Clio Payments. But to answer your question, I think it's really important when considering what tech stack you're going to partner with that it represents the client lifecycle, and you're really honing in on that specific sort of pain point within the firm. So if you find that the intake process is cumbersome and it's taking a long time to get back to leads, all right, well, maybe we address that, right? How can we streamline that process, make it a bit more efficient, help the firm get back to those leads in a more timely manner? If it's more so on the billing front or on the collection front, okay, let's hone in on that, right? Maybe we can streamline that billing process, or maybe it's the collection piece and you need sort of Kolleno's AR management tool. I think really being mindful of what stage of the process we're trying to address is key in determining the right partner as it relates to the tech stack.
And then one thing I'd love
Mickey,
to, oh, sorry, I'm just saying one thing I'd love to add too is your tech stack and that allowing you to work the way you work. So obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw this massive shift to remote work. Now we're seeing this mix of hybrid, maybe 1 day in the office, 2 days in the office, and then the rest from home or different locations. So what you want to consider is when you're implementing your technology is this allowing me to work the way that I want to work, that as a business we want to work, and you don't want your technology to hinder that. So do you have mobile options? Can you work on the go? Does it allow you to work when you want to work? So I think this is a big consideration. We're seeing hybrid model becoming more popular, around going in 1 day a week, but then spending time at home. So that's a big factor when considering technology.
And Mickey, I know that you've been on the ground and working with law firms as they're thinking through their own tech stack and some of the key elements involved in that. For any of the participants that are really starting to think through their own tech stack and what they need to kind of integrate and how they need to evolve it. What are some, taking a step back, what are some first steps that they should consider as they think through it?
Yeah, I think the first step is absolutely look at the problem you're currently facing and figure out if that is actually the problem. Because sometimes you think the problem is, oh, we're not getting back to clients in time, but really, like, it stems from something else way earlier in the entire process. So you really want to make sure that you're solving for the actual problem instead of solving for the symptom of what the problem actually is. So that probably would be my biggest piece of advice.
And as you go through, so as you're going through that process, are there certain steps that you've kind of taken, to kind of kickstart that? Like, what are some kind of best practices that you've implemented to try and really get an understanding of those kind of different pain points?
I think once you have a pain point, whatever that is, whether it's on the client side or whether that's something from one of your team members, have a conversation with them and figure out what it is, like what's going on that is having them run into this issue. And then you can kind of start to like trace back to like what the original issue is. Like, for example, like when we implemented Kolleno at the first law firm that I worked at, we were not able to collect money for whatever reason, like people weren't paying, and so we implemented Kolleno, and that was really great because it helped out with collection. But tracing back to why were we having so many people not collecting? Well, it's at the very beginning in the intake process, so we weren't asking people, what are your funds, what do you have to pay for this, and making sure checking that box off, and then we don't have to run into so many issues with collection at the end. And so it's really like going to like, what's the actual problem here? Oh, we're bringing on clients that can't afford us. That's the real problem.
Mhm. And Jay and Adam, we've kind of talked through that beginning process, working through to kind of identify what are some of those elements. From your perspective, as you're working with clients, what are some additional considerations that you try to factor in and to help them as they're going through and thinking through, what are kind of some of those key pieces we need to integrate within?
I think, something to consider when, going through like this process of determining the correct technology or pain point is making sure that you're choosing the right system and making sure that that system connects with your existing tools. So as much as you want to make sure you're addressing the specific pain point, if you're implementing a solution that doesn't connect with like the existing foundation of technology, it's going to be really difficult to adopt that technology and make sure the firm's using it properly. I think it really goes back to having an open API, right? Having tools that will plug and play with others. As I mentioned before, in the short term, that's going to enable firms to plug that tool into their existing tech stack and make sure firms are actually using it. Because the last thing you want to do is go through an evaluation, make an investment to implement something, and then not get adoption across the firm. And then in the long term, the benefit of that is as technologies become more prevalent throughout the industry, you can then implement those new tools within your foundation because of that open API. So I think making sure that your technology can plug into other tools, whether it's existing or maybe down the road, is a big thing to consider when going through that evaluation process.
And I think you talked about a key piece, which is really around the adoption element, right? Which, I think the implementation piece is, certainly a core part of it, but then it's, how do you kind of take a step back and how do you consider adoption, both from a back office, front office perspective and across the organization. So Mickey, as you were kind of working with some of the teams that you were working, how did you kind of think through that adoption process and how did you kind of help to push and promote that internally?
I think the big thing is you really want to make sure that whatever solution you've decided on investing in, it's framed as making their life easier. Because if it comes a thing and it's a new software, it brings a disruption to their day, and they're like, I don't want to do this. And so I think one of the most important things when you're looking at investing in any kind of legal technology is how user-friendly it is. Is it a UI, a user experience that is easy to make sense of? Is it simple to do? And you got to try it yourself. Like, okay, can I go through this and do exactly what I want to do with this without having to hop on the phone with support every 30 seconds? If you can't do it, then it's probably going to be difficult for other people. On the other hand, if it's really easy for you, and this is something that I want to make sure that those that are very tech savvy know, if it's very easy for you, look for the person in your office that has the most difficult time with technology, have them try it and see how easy it is for them. Because it's easy for them, then the rest of the team most likely will be able to adopt it relatively quickly. But if you're the only person that gets it and like everybody else is like, I don't really know what you're talking about, then you probably gotta double check and make sure with that very slow person if that user experience is actually simple to do. Oh, hello. Yes. Okay. You agree.
We got company. But Mickey, I absolutely love that point about getting the person who might have challenges with the office, because what it's all about is showing the benefits that technology can bring. It's helping you automate parts of your day that might be kind of a drag to do some of the work. What can we automate? What can we make it easier to fill in? How can technology help enhance your job so it's not just all manual processes? You really want to focus on the stuff that you need to focus on, whether that's billable time, stuff like that. So that's a really good point around really showing the value and the user experience to your folks in your law firm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think from our perspective, that's been really key is how do you enhance the UI UX and how do you make it as simple as possible and how do you kind of help and promote that internally so that it stays consistent and goes forward.
Yeah, I also like to do just one more quick point. I like to do test runs. So I'll have a guinea pig actually for whatever new technology that we're trying to get it going. because if I come in because I'm the one that's doing operations, like, oh, here's operations trying to make our lives like more difficult. But if it's one of their teammates that says this is so much easier, they will be much more likely to jump on board.
And so Adam and Jay, as you're working with clients in the field, like what are some steps that you guys do at Clio to kind of help with that adoption process and onboarding?
Yeah, I mean, I think onboarding and training, like really post sale, has been a huge investment from Clio's perspective. When I was on the sales side of things before moving into the channel role, I'd always encourage the clients that I was working with to do their due diligence on that front specifically. Obviously, the features and the pricing is important, but it's important to understand what happens post sale, right? Are you going to get support there? So something that Clio is really big on is offering complimentary training and onboarding as part of that. It's embedded in the cost per user per month. Once the firm signs up, they'll be connected with an onboarding specialist. They'll go through key workflows, really understand what the pain point is, and then tailor the onboarding to that firm's needs. Because we can't just do a generic onboarding for every one of our clients. Every firm is a bit of a snowflake. Everyone's a little different, and it's important that we understand those key pain points. So we're tailoring the solution to them. And then in addition to that, I think something that's often overlooked as well is support. I mean, no one wants to call support and no one wants to think about that they might have to call support. But the reality is, if you're using the system for 10 years, which is the goal, right? We want to make sure this is a long-term solution. It's inevitable you're probably gonna have to contact support at one point. And I think it's really important that there's someone on the other line who's going to pick up your call and help you out. And it's not just a canned automated response article. So I always encourage prospects and clients to do their due diligence on that front as well, because I find that sometimes overlooked in the evaluation stage.
And I think that's a really good point, especially as you're going through and trying to really push that and make sure it stays consistent across. And we've talked a little bit about onboarding, kind of the best practices to start to kick the process off and really trying to identify gaps and areas where firms can optimize their legal tech stack. But taking a step back, as you're taking a look at, a number of different, clients and organizations that you've worked with, what are some of the common reasons that these elements fail? I mean, adoption is clearly, one of the key elements. Are there other pieces? I mean, Mickey, are there other pieces that really come to mind? Like, what are some of the key risk factors that you see, even beyond just adoption, that have really kind of impeded some success?
I think adoption is definitely one of the major pieces. And I think to Adam's point, support is also like a very big piece. Not just like, okay, getting them to learn how to use it, but also like once they start knowing how to use it, like what about all the other features that they don't even know about? Because I know that very frequently you may bring on a tech solution that has all these bells and whistles and it sounds really great and it's like, okay, yes, I want to use all of this, but you don't even know that like they're constantly innovating and there's constantly new features. So if you bring on a company that has all these awesome features, you got to also be able to like know about them. So that's one of the things I really loved about Clio is that you guys are always constantly innovating and you're telling us about it. There are companies that will like start having all these new great features, but we don't really get a lot of information about it besides just like one email announcing a new feature, and that's kind of it. And so like they're putting in all this work, there's all these possibilities that you could do with it, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. And so eventually I people end up like not using it to its full capabilities.
And Adam and Jay, same question to you. Are there other kind of key elements? I mean, we talked adoption, support, anything, top of mind from, your interactions with clients as prospects as well?
Yeah, one thing I will say, like breaking it down into smaller chunks to make it more manageable, whether that's you're focusing on intake, you're focusing on case management, you're focusing on client portals. This makes it a lot more manageable to onboard. Like Mickey said, some of these solutions, including Clio, we have so many features, we can do so many things, but I think going down to the root of the problem and what you're trying to solve will be really helpful for onboarding. And then like Mickey said, we do a good job communicating what our new product features are and stuff like that. So you can continually iterate and add, but breaking it down into chunks, I think, is super helpful for new firms looking to implement technology like Clio.
Yeah, and I think that that's key, and I think that's one thing that we also talk about as well with firms is trying to really break it down into different chunks and thinking of it very much as like a journey, right? Once you actually identify the different elements and the different pieces that you're trying to integrate, trying to think more holistically about how it all fits in, and then really just trying to take that first step and trying to make that, a journey, a longer term journey as you're going through. But I think, one challenge around that I think that we often hear is that the technology landscape is changing so drastically, right? There's a number of different elements that are coming in with Gen AI and other elements as well. So maybe Adam, to kick off, as firms are looking to a number of different kind of developments and things like that, what are some things that are top of mind in terms of like tech trends and two or three kind of new developments that you're really keeping an eye out and you think that is going to impact really the field as we go forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, AI is certainly the buzz, right? You go to any conference, you talk to any firm, everyone's asking about how can we leverage AI? Is it going to replace the profession? What's the deal there? I think Clio's stance on AI, and certainly my stance, is that it's a tool that's going to amplify one's impact. We see AI as being a really powerful tool when used correctly, but I think it's something we're being cautiously optimistic about. We're definitely investing in AI, and it's going to be a part of our tech stack. But when speaking to consumers of technology, I think it's important they do their due diligence and they don't dive in headfirst. Just because as much as it can be an amplification tool, we also don't fully understand it. And it's important we're doing our due diligence from like a risk and compliance standpoint. And you use it cautiously and in a calculated way. Like for instance, I was just in New York at Legal Week, and it's incredible to see all the new vendors, but it's a bit overwhelming, right? And as a consumer of technology, how do you discern what's credible versus what's a risk? So I think keeping that top of mind as we work through the new technology is very important. I think another big trend that we're seeing is collections. Every year, Clio puts out a legal trends report where we pretty much consolidate all the data across our customer base and anonymize it into a really helpful report. And a new KPI that we're talking about is this concept of lockup, which is basically revenue that's been unbilled or uncollected. And a trend that I'm seeing is that more and more firms are taking on matters, increasing their revenue, but the collection piece remains a challenge. Specifically, all the revenue that's tied up in uncollected processes. So I encourage these firms to give more thought to their collection process, whether it's using a tool like Kolleno or it's using an LPM, to make sure that you're making it easy as possible for the clients to make payment, whether it's emailing out bills, giving an online payment link, and then having systems in place to follow up on these collection processes. I think those are two big trends that are going to become very important over the coming years.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean that certainly echoes the conversations that we're having, day to day with law firms as well, and legal experts is just specifically around that and how you kind of simplify that process, simplify those workflows. And I think it also brings up another element as well. I mean, a lot of times when we think of technology, sometimes we think of it much more of in terms of like, the back office and kind of focusing in on like billing and some of those key pieces. But there's a huge element around client management as well, right? And how are you actually able to do that? And so Jay, be interested to get your perspective on, where do you see that going, some of those client management tools as we go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big thing that I can see is really focusing on how you want to communicate with your clients, how your clients expect you to communicate with you. We're seeing a shift. Zoom is a perfect example. We're all on Zoom. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you wouldn't ever think of getting on Zoom with a lawyer. This is where we've kind of seen that shift over the last couple of years around expectation. And what we know is it's becoming even more competitive in the landscape. It's harder to retain clients, harder to generate clients, generate leads. So you really want to make sure you're producing that kind of outstanding client experience. So client communication is huge. Client portals as well, providing them a secure way to share documents, communicate with your firm. That's all kind of where it's heading is firms are really focusing on this client experience. And that's how you're going to kind of stay competitive, scale, grow, is really hone in on what am I doing in a technology perspective to make sure I'm providing the best possible client experience for potential clients, for clients that have already signed retainers on. But that's where I can really see firms focusing in the next couple of years.
Well, one quick point to add on that, we know that word of mouth referrals is the number one biggest driver of new business for law firms. So to Jay's point, it's absolutely imperative that firms are giving more and more thought to that client experience, aside from the fact that everyone wants to be likable, but because these firms or these clients are going to dictate what future business looks like. It's well documented. So I think that's a really good point, Jay.
Actually, one thing I just want to add too is I was reading through some of our old legal trends report data, and one of the stats that I was reading was around client expectations on response time. So I think this was 2018, Adam, if I'm correct. And it was 24 hours. There's like 80% of clients expect a response within 24 hours. I will tell you, a couple years has changed that. I'm sure that is like an hour or two. The faster you can respond, the more likely you are to retain that client. And as a consumer, expectations of response time is decreasing, and we know it's more likely that the client's going to retain you if you're the first firm to respond. So that's just going to keep getting tighter and tighter, and you need technology to be able to respond faster and faster to consumers.
And Mickey, as as you're working with firms as well, trying to think through that client management piece and technology to kind of help with that, what are some what are some things that you're hearing? What are some considerations that you're helping to advise and take into account?
I think, like Jay and Adam said, the expectation of being accessible and what their experience with your firm is really, really important. I mean, things are coming to our phones in milliseconds. We get things coming through our emails. You don't have to show up anywhere to sign anything anymore. So, you know, and that's the case with like other industries. The legal industry has the tendency to be a bit slower than everybody else. And so in terms of like adopting technology, using new technology. And so if you are able to give them that, quick, instant, and I'm saying instant, but they really are expecting like an instant like answer to things. If you're able to give them that and just shorten that time frame in which you're communicating with them, you really are going to have a better chance of retaining the client and keeping that client and having them say like, hey, this law firm is really easy to work with, because nobody wants to drive 40 minutes to meet their lawyer these days. Like they just don't. And they also know that if you can't do it, someone else probably could. And so, for the sake of convenience, they probably would go with someone else instead. So I really urge people to really shorten that time that it takes for you to communicate with them and to get them the information that they need and that they're looking for. And sometimes when they are looking for a lawyer, they're in a very high stress situation, whatever that is. That could be they're getting a divorce or they're getting sued by somebody. It's not a very fun time. And so you're stressed out, you want the information right away, and you want to know that you can rely on your lawyer as well. So if they're not responding to you in a time of need, you're not going to feel like this person is someone that I can rely on and that I can count on. And it's really important if you're a lawyer.
And there's something that you really touched on there. I mean, there's interest. It's the speed of information that's being shared, and I think the one thing that technology is really kind of enabling firms to be able to do is to really gather a lot of data and insights kind of very quickly, right? And so, as we shift through, and especially as AI comes in, we start to see like a lot more data and analytics that are coming in to help inform that, to help inform. So as we go through, Adam and Jay, as from Clio's perspective, how are you guys thinking about, the data and analytics element, within your own platform? How are you thinking about it in terms of like helping through law firms as they progress?
Yeah, when I think about data analytics, my mind immediately goes to intake, in that it's so critical for firms to understand where their leads are coming from, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's LinkedIn, a specific marketing campaign. If firms understand where their revenue is coming from, it's very difficult to double down and invest in the right marketing channels. So, specifically within Clio Grow, I think what's so great about the tool is that it provides a really insightful visibility in terms of what stage of the intake process each lead is within. And then more importantly, in the reporting section, you can understand where the leads are coming from. So what lead source is the most profitable for the firm, in terms of matters created, but also in terms of pipeline generated. And then you can also see like conversion rates by lead sources. I think, data is king. Without it, you're sort of in the dark. So just understanding where the business is coming from, where the leads are coming from, just so you can make sure you're really doubling down on the most effective marketing campaigns and seeing that ROI.
Yeah, one thing I would just love to add to is when you implement a system like Clio, for example, having that single source of truth is so critical when ensuring accurate data. So you don't want to have multiple systems that you're tracking case information, and having that one system that you know is an accurate representation of different data that you collect is so critical. And that's where Adam talked about that open API, having a single system that is kind of your operating system, then having other tools play into that and work with that data is just so critical, just to make sure you have the most accurate data possible.
Yeah, and I think we also see it from a kind of billing and collection standpoint as well, right? Being able to gather data and insights in terms of, the ways that clients prefer to pay, payment schedules, how you think through, your credit policies and all of those key elements. So, I think it's an integral part and certainly grows as things evolve. And Mickey, I know this is a particular area of interest for you as well, the legal and analytics side. So, kind of taking a step back, seeing where things are heading, from an operational standpoint, we've talked a little bit about like intake and things like that. How critical is that? And, what are some of the key questions that, some of the firms are already asking or should be asking around, legal kind of analytics to help inform their practice?
I think a lot of lawyers, when they hear the word data and analytics, their eyes start to glaze over a little bit, and it's totally understandable. I absolutely get it. And I want to just, I do want to iterate, it is very important. And also, you don't have to be the person that does it. You don't have to be the one that goes in and looks at all the spreadsheets and looks at all the numbers and figures out exactly what the problem is. But you do need someone on your team that's really good at that. And so I want to urge, anybody on here that's listening and they're like, oh my God, I don't know if I can like analyze a spreadsheet with all of this data. And you don't have to. If you have someone on your team that can do it, that's also great. But also, if you have a company that easily runs reports and what those reports are is understandable, then that also makes it a lot easier. Like Clio and Kolleno both have really great reports that you can find out the exact information that you're looking for without having to like really sit around and like dig into what do all these numbers mean. If you want to figure out like how many people came from LinkedIn on the Clio Grow, it's pretty easy to figure that out. It's a couple of buttons and a couple of clicks. And if you have any issues, I know that both Clio and Kolleno have really great support to help you figure out that data as well. So that's my take on it. You definitely got to find any legal text that you are investing in. You want to make sure that they have the ability to give you reports, because without reports, you're kind of like just shooting in the dark.
I can add one thing to Mickey's point there. Totally agree. I think it's on the technology provider, whether it's Clio, Kolleno, or someone else, to present the reports. But I think the onus is on the firm to define what their KPIs are, right? Like what are they trying to build around and optimize? Because if you don't know what your key performance indicators are, the data isn't as powerful. So I know, at least within the Clio world, we talk about three metrics all the time: utilization, realization, collection rate. So utilization out of the 8 hours in the day, what percentage is being billed for, realization of that, what's going to show up on the invoice, and then collection, how effectively is the firm collecting? And I know firms really trying to optimize around those three metrics and then use tools like Kolleno, like Clio, to make sure they're hitting on them. So absolutely, you got to leverage data, but it's even more important to understand what we're working towards.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would even add to that. I think, one of the key steps that we also, try to emphasize when we're having conversations with clients is, as you're taking a step back and thinking through that data, try to understand the why. What are those kind of key elements that you need, and how that feeds in as you start to think about the end in mind, right? How that feeds into ultimately what it is that you're trying to get to better position yourself as you're going through on those decisions.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. Less is more with these things, because if you have like a million thousand KPIs to look at, you're not actually going anywhere. I see it. I see Adam and Jay laughing because they know it's true. You want to make sure that you only have a couple of KPIs that you're looking at that are actually very important to your firm specifically, because your firm may care about something that another firm absolutely does not care about. It makes no sense for them, but it makes a lot of sense for you. And so you want to make sure that you really hone in on those couple of KPIs and not have, too many of them.
It's a good call out.
Yeah, certainly great advice. I know from a time perspective, I just want to make sure that we also allow for some questions as we go in. So also wanted to open it up to the audience. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to put it into the chat. And in the meantime, as we start to get those questions coming in, Mickey, Adam, and Jay, maybe I'll go through kind of one by one and just say, any kind of tips or advice as firms are really thinking about taking the first step, whether it's, very early stage process in terms of, first steps in building their tech stack, or as they're thinking to expand that out. Mickey, taking a look back as you've gone through this process, what's like a tip or best practice or piece of advice that you wish you had been given as you were going through, your own journey?
I think there's this concept of Kaizen. There's a Japanese concept called Kaizen where you make small incremental changes that affect like the much bigger picture. And so I know that when you're reviewing multiple technologies and you're looking at all these features and you're looking at all of these different solutions that could possibly solve your problem, I want to urge you to take a look at like what is really like the smallest, tiniest change that you could make that would have probably a massive impact. So like don't think about it as like we have to change everything all at once, but like what's like one tiny thing that you could do. And I'm thinking about like the other day I was at UPS and I had the delivery guy was bringing in boxes or bringing out boxes to his truck, and it's like mountains of boxes, Amazon boxes, and he's like struggling to get out the door. He's running into people are opening the door for him, and it's at the door that like boxes fall over, and I'm like, why doesn't he just have a door stopper? And it's like this small tiny thing. It's a door stopper, like it's very simple, but a door stopper would have helped him so much to make his job so much easier. He wouldn't have to like worry about running into people. He wouldn't have to worry about kicking the door open, and he's got all these boxes in his hands, right? So think about it in that way. Look for like the smallest thing that can make the biggest impact.
And Adam, maybe I'll hand it over to you next. Another tip or piece of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage folks to try and look beyond the surface level questions when they're evaluating their technology partner. So I think people often get caught up in the price or the feature set, or whatever it may be, whatever that immediate sort of thought is. But as we've discussed throughout this presentation, I think it's really important to be a bit more thoughtful in terms of the less sort of sexy things, right? Like, what does the support look like? Is it an open API? Is there a migration process and onboarding? Is the company financially backed, right? Have they been acquired several times and sliced and diced? I think those are things that are often overlooked in the evaluation process and only come up post implementation, but they're so critical, if not more important than the price or potentially the feature set. I also love Mickey's answer. Here at Clio, we're firm believers in Kaizen. We often talk about continuous improvement and the aggregation of marginal gains. I think that's another important thing to consider. Like, is that technology partner improving? Not necessarily from the standpoint of are they rolling out new technology all the time, but are they listening to their customers and improving based on that feedback? Obviously, it's a hard thing to determine in the evaluation set, but I would just encourage folks to ask that of their vendor. So yeah, I think I would leave it at that.
Nice. And Jay,
yeah, I can jump in here. So Mickey brought up a really good point at the beginning of this conversation around having a clear understanding of what you want to achieve, what's the problem, before defining the solution. That's kind of what some advice I would give is really to understand what problem you're trying to solve, have that clear vision of what tools can come in and help. Just having that clear problem is going to help you ask questions of your vendor, know exactly what you want to get out of the conversation with the vendor. So that'd be kind of my advice. And don't be afraid to ask questions of your vendor while you're going through evaluation. We're all here to help. At Clio, we're mostly friendly Canadians, folks in Ireland as well. So we're more than happy to help answer questions, and don't be afraid to ask. We're here to be a resource.
I think that's great advice. It's start out with your vision, really understand what it is that you want, take some small steps as you go through, and think beyond the surface and ask questions. So I think that's great. I see that we have a few questions come in, and Jay, I know that you touched upon, kind of the software solutions and asking questions. So maybe I'll kick off with you on this one. Um, what are some of the key things that you would advise firms to look at when they're evaluating, two different software solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Adam touched on this. The support is so critical. There's varying degrees of what support is offered out there, and I think having that personalized, customized support is a really big factor when looking at software. Just because you want to make sure you're feeling supported. It's a big investment. As Adam said, we have, you're looking for practice management for 10, 15 plus years. You really want to make sure that you're going to be supported. As well as what kind of continuous improvements is the software making. Software is obviously, especially at Clio, we're constantly iterating and improving, adding new features. You want to make sure that you're selecting a vendor that 5, 10 years down the road, that it's going to meet your needs based on the iterations and the improvements that they're making and investing in the software.
And
Oh,
Mickey,
you're on.
sorry, realized I was on mute there. Same question to you. What are some as you were kind of taking a look at different software solutions and going through your own journey, what's some pieces of advice that you would give when evaluating?
I think when you're evaluating, I really want to drive the point that you need to know what the problem is first before you can really decide on one solution versus the other. I mean, we at one point we had decided on using we're going back and forth between a couple of different solutions for our intake, and one of the big issues that we were running into was we weren't able to get information to our attorneys and information to our clients in an automatic way. And we ended up switching over to a company that was able to do that and more on top of what we were already doing. So we were using a different intake solution, and then we switched over to a new one that did everything the old one did and had more on top of it. So like we knew that like we liked what the other one was doing, we just needed a little bit more. So we were able to choose the right one. And so it really is about figuring out, if you're trying to decide between two different solutions, you really want to make sure that it fits all of the needs that you had before and all of the needs that the whatever old solution that you have now is not meeting anymore.
And I'm just cognizant of time. One last question, maybe I'll throw it out to the group. I know we talked about Gen AI and the impact of AI potentially, within the field over the next few years. Are there any other things? Are there one or two other things that the group is looking at that they think could really impact the field over the next kind of 3 years? Or is AI, Gen AI, kind of the key piece that's at the forefront of everyone's mind here?
For me, AI is a really big one, but it's also what outcomes are artificial intelligence going to bring. An exciting piece for me is how this is going to improve access to justice. Can you automate tasks? Can you reduce the manual labor so you can lower your rates and improve access to legal services? So I think AI, especially like legal aid space, stuff like that, artificial intelligence is going to be critical to improve access to justice. So I'm more excited beyond just hey, it's going to save you, 5 billable hours a week, but more like how is this going to holistically change the way we approach client services?
Perfect. Well, with that, I know we're at time, but just before we go, I know Jay and Adam, there was an element that you wanted to also share with the group, and then we'll kind of share next steps after that as well. So Jay, maybe I'll hand it over to you on this one.
Absolutely. So this is right off the press. This came out yesterday. Clio is offering up to 6 months free if you are switching legal softwares. So some terms and conditions, but basically speak with a Clio specialist. You attend a demonstration. You bring a proof of what your contract is. If you are stuck in a contract, let's say a year, 2, 3 years, we're offering up to 6 months free based on the remaining value of the contract. Also, we'll be giving £100 gift card for attending a demo. The link is here. Actually, why don't I post this in the chat as well? Let me pull it up. But yeah, we're here to help. We know there's a big cost switching softwares, and it's a pretty lucrative offer for folks looking to make a switch.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, firstly, to all the participants that joined us today. I know that we went through, quite a bit of material in a very short amount of time. So the one thing I will say is, if anyone on the line, has any further questions, please feel free to reach out directly. Happy to answer any questions as everyone thinks through and goes through their own journey. Also wanted to take the opportunity to thank our panelists. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jay, for all of the insights that you shared today. In terms of next steps, we've also recorded this session as well. So all participants will be receiving a recording via email following the session. And then we also welcome, everyone, the participants on the call to join us and connect on LinkedIn. If you have any follow-up questions, anything further, and feel free to check out, Kolleno.com, to check out Clio's and to connect with Mickey as well. We look forward to supporting everyone here as they go through the journey and helping them in any way that we can. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.